Welcome to Mug to Mug with Erin. I'm Erin. This is my mug. This is my other mug. And I'm glad your mug is here today too. Today I've got this magnifying glass and I have been having way too much fun with it because it makes things bigger. Look at that. Look at my eye. It's crazy. I have a magnifying glass because I want to talk about detectives and being a detective. So to start off, I want to ask, who is your favorite detective? Do you have a favorite detective? If you could be a detective, who would you be? And when I think of a detective, kind of old school with the magnifying glass, I do think of Maxwell Smart in Get Smart. It was a TV show back in the day, and he had all kinds of gadgets that were much fancier than a magnifying glass, but that sometimes his gadgets would distract him and he was kind of bumbling, and somehow he always got the bad guy in the end. Another person I think of is Sherlock Holmes. Now he was the opposite of Maxwell Smart. He was stealthy, he was so intelligent, and he could find patterns and clues in all kinds of places. So when I think of those two, they solved crimes. They closed some cases. But if I think about what kind of detective I am, I would have to choose a more recent detective, one that was, well, she's known better to much younger people, and that is Dora the Explorer. And I am most like her because no matter what mystery she was trying to solve or what journey she was on, the clues were always right in front of her, and she always had to have the audience's help. She had to get people to help her, and that's pretty much like me. Things can be right in front of me, and I won't see them. Last week, I encouraged you to look for God's fingerprints in your lives, evidence of His presence and His provision in your everyday life. It is a skill to be learned. But I think that the more we get the hang of it, we will find out, like Dora the Explorer, that the clues were right in front of us all along. His fingerprints are everywhere. We just need to know how to look for them. If we begin to see God's fingerprints in all aspects of our life, then we will begin to believe that we are not alone. And when we believe that we are not alone, we begin to see life differently. We live differently. We live with much more peace and joy and confidence that we do not have to shoulder it all on our own. It is such a joy to know and really believe that God is with us. And that is what Christmas and everyday life is all about. Knowing that God is with us in every moment and in every situation. I created a place for you to write down all the ways that you see God's fingerprints in your life. You can find a link to that in the description of this video. It's important to write things down because writing down helps us remember. It also helps to have a record to go back on the days that we forget, and we can see God's faithfulness in our lives. So today, as we talk about looking for God's fingerprints in our lives, whether or not we have a microscope, we can see His goodness to us in so many ways. So you may ask, Erin, where do I look to find God's fingerprints? Psalm 145 verse 9 says, "The Lord is good to all, and His mercy is over all that He has made." And if you ask little kids, what did God make? They will say, God made everything. Everything we see, everything around us, God made. And His mercy is over all that He has made. When we think about God's goodness, there is a theological term called common grace. And it's not common as in not special. It's common as in it extends to everyone. And there are certain areas that God's grace extends to everyone, whether or not they believe in God, whether or not they like God or follow God. There are 3 areas where His common grace is just lavished on everyone. And the first one is in the everyday things, the little things that we all enjoy, whether it's happiness or things in nature, the rain. So these things are not they're not set aside just for people who follow God or who trust God. They are common. They are to all people. And so that is part of God's goodness. So the first thing that I think of is our breath, like the breath that we breathe that keeps us alive, comes from the Lord. And He allows us to breathe, and even people who don't like Him or aren't speaking to Him or say bad things about Him, He still gives them breath. And that shows His patience and His mercy and His desire that all people should come to know Him. And He gives us so many chances. The second area where we see God's kindness is the way that He restrains sin and evil in our society. As crazy as things are, they could be worse. God does restrain. He holds back the flood of evil. He holds back sin. And we can thank Him for that. And we can see as we look, we can see His fingerprints in the way that He restrains evil. And the third way is the way that He designed us to live in societies, our communities. You know, we care for one another. We have compassion on other people. The fact that we know just kind of innately that some things are good and some things are evil, all of that are signs of God's common grace. If God did not lavish that on our world and on us, it would be a very different place. And I don't think it could stand for very long. So when we're looking for God's fingerprints, we can look in those areas. Just look around. Do you have shelter? Do you have food to eat? Those are the ways that He provides for us. And next time I'll talk about His purpose. We can see His fingerprints all over His purpose He has for us. So if you're still going, Erin, I don't know about this, I don't know how to see God's fingerprints, then I want to encourage you just to start with a simple prayer. Ask God to help you see Him in your everyday life. Thank you for joining me on Mug to Mug with Erin. I'll see you next week.